Why do we follow the law? Imagine a neighborhood controlled by a crime boss. You open a store there. He demands a cut of your income regularly and tells you what you're allowed to sell. You've seen what happens to those who disobey. So, you follow his rules to stay safe. This crime boss is clearly a bad guy. His authority feels oppressive. You do not believe he has the right to control your actions. But now compare that to the government. It also requires you to hand over income in the form of taxes, and it decides what goods can or cannot be sold, what is allowed, and what is not. If you disobey, the police may arrest you. You could even end up in jail. We may sometimes resent government power. That feeling is natural, but most people still believe the government is not the same as a gang. You may follow both sets of rules because it serves your own interest, but does the law deserve more respect? Do you owe it a higher duty? If you could ignore the crime boss without punishment, you might not feel guilty, but even if you dodge legal punishment, most people still believe breaking the law is wrong. There's a moral weight behind the law. But where does it come from? So again, why do we follow the law? Anarchists have a very different answer. They argue there's no real difference between governments and gangs. From a young age, people are taught to respect state power. But anarchists say that respect is misplaced. They believe that kind of authority is built only on the threat of punishment. The state can punish you so you obey. But is that real legitimacy? That's the question. The anarchist perspective forces us to think deeper. Why do we feel a duty to respect the law at all? Or put another way, what gives the state any true legitimacy? Of course, many laws do reflect moral rules. They match what we consider right and wrong. For example, you're required to follow laws that forbid murder. And that makes sense, because killing is clearly immoral. But many other laws, like tax rules, traffic laws, business contracts, or healthcare and education policies, are not directly tied to morality. So beyond personal ethics, what duty do we have to obey them? Why should we follow these laws at all? You might answer, because we need the state, don't we? The English philosopher Thomas Hobbes, writing in the 1600s, believed that, without a state, life would become unbearable, maybe even unthinkable. He asked us to imagine a natural world without law or government, a world with no rules, no order, just survival. In that state, people would act by instinct alone. They would focus only on their own needs, food, shelter, safety, and companionship, not the needs of others, especially not strangers. But Hobbes pointed out, in a natural state, resources are scarce. Food and shelter are hard to find, and everything worth having is limited. So fierce competition becomes unavoidable. People will constantly fight to survive, struggling for the bare essentials, and living in constant fear, afraid someone will take what little they have. Life in that world is dark and hopeless. Some would even call it a nightmare. And as Hobbes said, in that kind of world, industry cannot grow, because people have no way to protect what they build. No one feels secure in their work. Everything they create is at risk. And in that kind of world, there's no human civilization, no understanding of the earth at all, no sense of time, no art, no literature, no society, and worst of all, constant fear and the threat of violent death. In such a world, life is lonely, poor, harsh, brutal, and short. Hobbes believed that without order in society, scarcity and competition will lead to all-out conflict. It sounds pessimistic, but even optimists have a hard time disagreeing with the logic behind it. People may want to cooperate for the greater good, but without trust, there can be no real cooperation. In a world full of hunger, pain, and fear of death, even the kindest people would struggle to trust anyone else. And without trust, there's no cooperation. Farming, science, industry, and literature, they all depend on cooperation. Without it, civilization simply cannot move forward. No farms, no labs, no factories, and no books. Hobbes' solution was to form a government, ruled by a monarch with absolute power. That ruler would create and enforce a shared set of rules to build trust within society and lead people out of chaos. More than 1,000 years earlier, the Chinese philosopher Mozi made a similar argument long before Hobbes. Mozi believed that before states existed, the world was chaotic like a place of wild beasts. He believed this chaos came from natural disagreement between people. As he put it, everyone thinks their own opinion is right, and they reject the views of others, so people spend their time blaming each other. Those with the power to help choose to do nothing. Those with wealth let it rot rather than share it. Those with useful knowledge keep it to themselves. Like Hobbes, Mozi believed that to end this chaos, the only solution was to appoint a ruler with absolute authority, someone who could set a single standard for all, and enforce that standard through punishment. Once people stopped acting on personal will alone and followed shared rules, society could finally have peace and prosperity. Today, most believe state power should be limited. We reject the idea of total control by a monarch, but we generally agree that the state is necessary. It protects our interests, and it enforces the law. Just look at countries torn apart by civil war. It becomes clear how dangerous a collapse of state power can be. The chaos, the loss, without national authority. Your own neighborhood might become even more dangerous than one ruled by gangs. But that raises a deeper question. Why do we feel an obligation to the state, but not to the gang? Anarchists believe the legitimacy of the state should be questioned. If breaking the law better serves your personal interest, are you really obligated to follow it? Or at least accept the punishment if you don't? And if such a duty exists, where does it come from?